My name is Mark Darcy. It's a huge honor and pleasure to be here. When I was thinking about what to present today, I thought you'd like to see work. So I do a few talks around the world where I wave my hands around. I talk around grand theories of social design. There'll be a lot less of that today. There's going to be a lot more work. So I'm going to show you some work. But first, I'll tell you a little bit about me. This is Auckland. This is where I grew up. Who's been to Auckland? Yeah? It doesn't really look like that. It looks a bit Vegas-y. It has more sheep. When I was 23, I moved to New York to be a creative director. It was my big dream to be a creative director in New York, and I did work there in a bunch of agencies, writing ads, award-obsessed, loving every second of it. And then in 2004, I went to work for a company called Time Warner, big media company, as chief creative officer there, doing a lot of what I do now, really looking at how you use media and technology and creativity to kind of make interesting things that make companies money and don't suck for people who have to watch them and experience them. And that's sort of the confluence of what I think a lot of the business is about, is how do we use creativity to leverage all this technology and access and all this amazing stuff we have, but in ways that are interesting and beautiful and enrich society in some way. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. I just recently, about 7 months ago, moved to London for the weather, mainly. So I can really hang out more in Europe and do things like take 1-hour flights or so to Hamburg to be with you. So that's pretty exciting for me. But I actually grew up in Lancashire in the north of England for the first 10 years of my life. Who has been to the north of England? I'm sorry. This is a pretty good shot of the north of England in the 1970s. And when I was a little boy there, we watched a lot of TV. There you go, Starsky and Hutch. Who's a fan of Starsky and Hutch? Yeah, so when I was a kid and when you were watching TV, you had to run home to see TV. I'm not that old, but you had to run home to see TV, and TV was incredibly powerful. I think in Germany you had 2 channels as well. And you had to run, man. When that show was on, you had to run home. Because if you missed it, there was no way to ever see that show again. That television, that medium had extraordinary power. And one of the things we'll talk about today, or I'll touch on, is the fact that I think our entire industry is built on the basis that we think we have that much control and power over people's time and attention. And yet the entire world has changed in a matter of years, but we really still are predicated on a model where we think we have the right to talk to people. I asked for this is a very couture presentation for this room, and I asked the German office, what's a better example of a show the audience will understand? I swear they said David Hasselhoff. This is not me making some lame foreign guy joke. They sent me this and I said, they're not going to laugh, but you laughed, so they win the prize. And obviously, in this medium, in this era that I grew up in, this is where I fell in love with advertising, with Collar Dickinson Pierce, BMP, these amazing advertisements, if you know British advertising, that were a huge part of culture. A huge, huge part of culture. But as I touched on, something extraordinary has happened really, really recently. And we're not at the end of what I'm going to talk about, but we're really, really close to having 3 amazing superpowers. We probably have more, but we have 3 amazing superpowers. The first amazing superpower we have is we can watch anything ever made anywhere at any time. Right? So while I was running to watch Starsky and Hutch, those days are gone, right? We now live in a world where we seamlessly have access to anything ever created. This means as creators of content and experiences, and this will freak you out, everything you make is competing with everything ever made. Right? So when you say, hey, we've come up with this little documentary, it's pretty good, you're competing for attention with Citizen Kane, right? Because I could be watching Citizen Kane on a streaming video, or I could be watching your branded content. This is a very high competitive set for the kind of things that matter. The second thing we have, the second superpower we have, is infinite memory. We as a people have infinite memory now. Memory is irrelevant, and that's an extraordinary gift when it comes to how we collect and look at the things that matter to us, photography, video, whatever it may be. We have infinite memory. And think of how this has changed music, huh? The third one, and this is one that my company, I think, has played a pretty major role in through identity and through being able to connect people, is we can actually find people now. So originally with the internet, those of us that grew up with it, it was a terrible way to find people because I was NYC Kiwi. It's very hard to find NYC Kiwi to compare to that kid you went to school with. But thanks to Facebook, and primarily through Facebook, we can now find 1 billion people or more, can find people all over the world and connect with them and connect with these people. And it's a fundamental change that's turned the web into a social web. So we've got this huge amount of content. We've got all these different things going on. We've got infinite access to infinite things. So how do we decide what matters? How do you possibly filter out the good from the great. How do we filter out how to use our time? How do we optimize from this application being on our phone to that application being on our phone? All the experiences that we invest time in, how do we decide what actually matters? Because we've got everything going up and our memories and our processing power are staying the same. Well, we believe we rely, as we always have, on the wisdom of friends. We're hugely influenced as humans, a core human behavior to be influenced by this stuff. So when you see terms like this, and you go, to like, what does this mean, to share? What do these terms mean? These are not technical terms. These are simply human terms. This is social. When you hear the term social, just think of people and how people connect around ideas. And when you express ideas in a way that people can vote with them, can connect with them, and be endorsed by them, your ideas are going to raise up and be shared by more people. And this, to me, when you look at where people discover what matters in their life, Facebook is a primary driver. A newsfeed on Facebook is a primary driver of where hundreds of millions of people around the world every day decide, from news stories to personal stories to everything in their life. This is where you decide what's going to get to the top. This has had three pretty prime shifts in communication, which I won't go deep on, but we can talk about them maybe in questions. I think we're moving from an era of disruption to connection. A core part of our craft has been to disrupt a medium in order to get attention. What we want to disrupt culture in these connected brand network worlds, we really need to build things that serve and work with the networks to get our message to more people. It's a different skill set to saying, how do I break this machine to draw attention to myself? We're moving from a world of search to discovery. The art of discovery, making our ideas discoverable, is a fundamentally different shift from just saying we're going to make them searchable, because so much of what people find in their lives, they're not actively searching for it, they're finding it through other contexts. And obviously a lot of the things I look at is through social context and the things their friends are looking at. The third thing, and this is probably a huge part of what the advertising industry, generally, I think anyone in the communication arts needs to be thinking about, is heavyweight versus lightweight. I'm as guilty as I bet everybody in this room is of designing very integrated, multimedia, multifaceted campaigns that asked a user to make a short film, submit that film to a microsite, have their friends re-edit that film for them, then send it to a magazine who will judge it, and then and it goes on and on and on and on. We have to ask ourselves one question when you're in a room and someone's pitching you those ideas: would any normal person do this? Would any normal human being actually go through this process other than the mother of the art director, right? And we need very high return on attention, and the lightweight design techniques that are primary drive what happens in Silicon Valley need to be far more broadly adopted by people in the rest of, I think, the industry. So this can sound confusing. There's lots going on. There's all this noise. I actually don't think of it. I'd probably try and simplify it. It's probably a New Zealander in me. Just like a dinner party. There's a lot of conversation going on. There's a lot of to and fro where people are sharing ideas and sharing thoughts, and as a brand, we have to say, how are we adding value to this conversation? What are we doing to add value? Where does this conversation take place? Well, it takes place in a lot of places, and the most place it takes is in the real world, just as it always has for a couple of thousand years or more. But another place it takes place, a huge place it takes place, and these are the only two slides I have with numbers, but it's just to contextualize a point, is a huge place of where this conversation takes place in Germany and around the world is on Facebook. And the scale of it, and this is a thing I think we need to spend far more attention at, is the scale of the canvas and the reach is fundamentally different to any other platform that's ever been created. The way in which people are engaging, the consistency, the role this discovery engine plays in people's lives is quite extraordinary. I'll show you this one. We're going to talk about mobile later, but that's a US statistic of the percentage of time spent on app usage of all apps. So that bar graph goes out to hundreds of thousands. But this is where people are going, because this is where the people they care about and the things they care about are. And that is where we want our stories to be. That's the last number slide, I promise. Let's do something more fun. So the day I arrived in England, there was a thing that blew up from a company called Bodyform, which I don't know whether you have Bodyform in Germany, but Bodyform is a feminine hygiene brand. And a man called Richard Neal posted on their Facebook page, I will paraphrase this so we can keep going, that he was very disappointed in Bodyform because for years he'd watched their advertisements with women, when they used their product, went horseback riding and parachuting, and were very happy. But he discovered after just moving in with his girlfriend, this wasn't quite the case during that time of the month, and he wanted to sue them for false advertising because they'd been defrauded. This blew up, this took off. This was one of those viral explosions that a brand can deal with many ways. But one of the best things that's going on now is this dialogue that's happening between individual people and large organizations, whether government or brands. Bodyform decided not to write a polite note from the customer service person. They produced a small film, which I'll play for you.
Hello, Richard. I'm Caroline Williams, the CEO of Bodyform. We read your Facebook post with interest, but also a sense of foreboding, and I think it's time we came clean. We lied to you, Richard, and I want to say sorry. Sorry. What you've seen in our advertisements so far isn't a factual representation of events. You're right. The flagrant use of visualization such as skydiving, rollerblading, and mountain biking, you forgot horse riding, Richard, are actually metaphors. They're not real. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but there's no such thing as a happy period. The reality is, some people simply can't handle the truth. In the past, we've tried to be more honest in our approach. In the 1980s, we ran a series of focus groups to help us gauge the public's reaction to periods. The cramps, the mood swings, the insatiable hunger. And yes, Richard, the blood coursing from our uteri like a crimson landslide. So, we knew we'd have to change our strategy. And so, from that day to this, we have managed to maintain this illusion. But you, Richard, have torn down that veil and exposed this myth, thereby exposing every man to a reality we hoped they would never have to face. You did that, Richard. You. Well done. I just hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us. Oh, sorry, Richard. You did know that we do that too, didn't you? Hello, Caroline Williams. Yes.
So their response blew up back at Richard, right? This brand didn't just sit there and take someone making fun of them, or making fun of the category, but they actually responded in kind. And Cara in London did that with a great little branded content company, and they did it really quickly. I think one of the things that we talk about is creativity at the speed of culture. It's no good going away for 6 months and coming up with a witty response to Richard's note. You have to work. You've got to go, this is actually something that's happening. We have to have a voice in this. We have to come back and we need to be part of this conversation. So the beautiful wooden award you see is the Facebook Studio Awards. I'm going to take us through some work. We just did the awards a couple of months ago. They're judged by the Facebook Creative Council that I formed a year ago in Cannes. It's made up of many chief creative officers whose names you'll know. Jean Remy from Unger graciously joined. And we're looking to shine a spotlight. The question I get most as I travel around the world and meet with particularly agencies is they go, yeah, social guy. Where's the work? Show me the work. So we'll talk about some of the work. And the first two pieces of work I show you are what I would look at as like deep storytelling. It's a lot of the work you'll see in award shows generally that utilize the Facebook platform, where it's like, what's something we can do to use graph data or build an application to tell a story in a cool way. And this first one's a lovely one. It won a gold from BBDO in New York for AT&T. And the challenge was, as the film will explain, was how do you get kids to be empowered to make a great case for getting a fancy new smartphone. So this is from BBDO in New York.
Question. How can AT&T help young people prove to their parents they deserve a new 4G smartphone?
Don't answer that question. Let your new lawyer take over.
Introducing You've Got a Case, a digital experience that gives young people access to their very own Facebook attorney.
Hi, come on in. I'm powerful internet attorney Kent Wesley. You know that, you're in my office. I think you deserve the AT&T 4G smartphone of your holiday dreams. But first, you need to grab me a tiny peek at your Facebook profile. Don't worry, it won't get creepy. I probably could have made it less creepy by blinking once or twice during all of that.
The campaign launched with a flurry of promotional ads, banners, Facebook ads, tweets, classifieds, and pre-roll.
Kent Wesley, high-powered internet attorney. And these are just some of the pants I've sued off people.
All roads lead to Kent's stately Facebook office, where you select the smartphone you want, name your gift giver, and litigate.
Ladies and gentlemen of Facebook, my legal team has prepared a case proving my client deserves a smartphone from their mom.
Every case gets a random combination of expert witnesses who all testify on your behalf. incorporating your friends, your favorite movies, your school, everything into a customized plea. Your airtight argument posts directly to your defendant's wall, pleading your case before a jury of your Facebook peers.
Do you believe that my client deserves a holiday gift that will make them popular? A gift more or less personally endorsed by an actual star who's asked me to invest in his independent film? No, by the way, no, I won't. You just got served. Kent Wesley rests.
2-second recess.
You've Got a Case was a social and commercial success. It leveraged everything about Facebook into a way to sell phones. The entire campaign was an appeal from one Facebook user to another, so shareability was built in. Nearly 500,000 people consulted Kent. Click-through rates to purchase were up to 5 times greater than the benchmark, and we nailed our demographic. Over half of Kent's clients were 13 to 24. AT&T's 4G smartphone sales boomed, marking a record quarter. It was also a landmark in the mobile category, the first project ever that allowed users to generate and view personalized Facebook videos entirely from mobile devices. The results were almost as dramatic as Kent.
But aren't we all just scared little girls?
Case dismissed.
The verdict was unanimous.
Mark that as a W.
If you've got Kent Wesley, you've got a case.
And the only thing I can't win is a losing contest.
So once again, it's basically a direct response ad. It's a direct response ad that's deeply personal. It's a direct response ad the user delivers for you. It's a direct response ad with great sight, sound, and motion, all built on the platform. The next one's a little closer to home. This was a real emotional favorite for the jury, not just because it was incredibly fun. And some of you may know this, I'm assuming some of you may know this case, but I wanted to play it because it showed that sometimes we don't have enough money or it's a small client and what are we going to do? So much of the great innovation that I see on Facebook actually comes from small businesses, and this is somewhere between a small business and a big account. But it's a lovely way of saying no matter what scale of the challenge you have, there's amazing ways you can connect with a lot of people through the platform.
In Switzerland's Graubünden region, there are several tiny, beautiful villages. Unfortunately, no one's ever heard of them. This is Obermutten. 78 residents, 1 church, 1 hotel, and a few cows. But then one day Obermutten launches a Facebook page.
Unsere Gemeinde hat seit heute eine Facebook-Seite.
The promise? Hit the like button and we'll put you on the village bulletin board. And a lot of people seem to like Obermutten. Soon the bulletin board is full, and soon half the village. But the good people of Obermutten stick to their promise. Every fan is posted, even if everyone in the village has to help out. Obermutten becomes the most active Facebook page in Switzerland. 4 out of 5 fans interact with the page, which is better than with Lady Gaga, Coca-Cola, and Justin Bieber. The new members receive a warm welcome. Every question is answered.
Wir sind uns da bewusst, dass es Verzögerungen gegeben hat, aber wir müssen uns auch begreifen. Die Frau und ich haben hier einen Gasthof.
After only 4 weeks, Obermutten has fans from 32 countries on every continent in the world. And Obermutten has more fans than St. Moritz, Helsinki, and Florence.
Ein kleines Bergdorf in der Schweiz.
Facebook pages.
By now, more than 60 million people have read, seen, or heard about Obermutten. Traffic on the Graubünden tourism website increased by 250%. 10,000 Swiss francs turned into the media equivalent of 2.4 million. Today, this small village in the Swiss mountains has friends all over the world. Thousands have promised to visit, hundreds have already done so.
So there, the lesson, I think, isn't you should take people's photos and put them on notice boards. The lesson, I think, there that's a beautiful part of some things I see all over the world with Facebook is intimacy being created at scale. The first thing you need to realize about approaching the audience, when we look at Facebook, people use large numbers like 25 million a month, 14 million a day, and it's designed to be impressive and puff our chests out. That's not actually what's important. What's important is they're individuals. They're authentically identified real people who, when they've expressed an interest in a brand, are doing so as themselves. And if you can create experiences where the humanity of an organization that you're working with actually cares, actually connects, actually delivers value, you will get exponential value on Facebook and beyond Facebook because you're demonstrating those values in a way that those stories are going to be shared. Yeah. So those were two examples of most of the work you will see. I haven't seen the work in the show, generally in award shows. And they're lovely, and we respect them. But now I want to talk about an entire body of work that's going to be far more core to, I believe, how you're going to express storytelling for your brands on Facebook. And the simple way to encompass it is through Facebook publishing. This is the driving narrative that brands have to connect with and tell stories on a regular basis on our platform. And a lot of you who are on Facebook and look at that will look at what brands are posting and you may say, well, that's not very hard, or that's not very interesting, or I could do better than that. And we'll get to that later, that I could do better than that. But what I wanted to tell you through a couple of case studies where seemingly ordinary business challenges that could have easily had ordinary publishing just use the native platform. What we mean is no applications, no code, just storytelling and a point of view to drive extraordinary success for some companies and some brands in the marketplace. And it was taken because they took the time and energy to craft some really amazing, not just one-off posts, but real arcs. The first one is Dallas. There's a lot of old 70s TV shows in this presentation. This has more old 70s TV shows than any presentation I think given on social media. But this is a real case study from last year where Dallas, Warner Brothers brought the show Dallas back. They rebooted the show. It's a huge hit all around the world, particularly in the States. And they wanted to reintroduce the show. And the film tells the story of how they did this on Facebook. Not just by driving fans and doing that kind of thing, but really through a unique way of using the platform to tell a very deep, rich story.
This summer, the landmark series Dallas returns to TNT. And we were challenged to modernize the show with a social campaign that would introduce the iconic series to new viewers. But how do you engage a fan base that's been dormant for 20 years and attract a new, younger audience that hadn't grown up with the show? The answer, the Dallas Facebook timeline and this guy.
I hate to hit a man below the belt, but you know I will.
We set out to retell the entire history of Dallas through the eyes of J.R. Ewing, one of TV's most iconic and sinister characters. From the very first moment of the original series through the present day of the new show, viewers could relive every backstab,
Interesting than the slut I'm looking at right now.
every double cross, and every memorable moment through one man's wildly biased perspective.
Morning.
But the original series ended in 1991, so what about the past 20 years? We bridged this enormous gap by having JR fill us in on the missing decades, how he saw fit. Fans of the original series engaged like never before. The timeline opened a floodgate of old memories and sparked raging debate over the lost years. In the end, the man we all love to hate led to an unprecedented level of engagement for a TV fan page.
It also made the show incredibly successful in the States. It had an enormous opening, and a lot of it, and Warner Brothers would say this, was driven not just by the quality of the reboot they did to the show, but by re-engaging through storytelling. Not just one story, not just one film, but taking that story and making it relevant to millions of people all across the market who are like, I remember that, but why does it matter? And then bringing it back to the fore. An amazing, really a huge investment in storytelling. And probably one of the key bits that I think differentiated it was the writers of the show actually did the writing. It was actually done from the core writing room. They got the people in, so the mythology was the same. It wasn't just put in a corner to be like, let's do the Facebook. It was right in the heart of where the show was coming from. The next one I'll show, which is a very fun one, I like to talk about a lot, is David Droger's agency, Droger 5, have really put this concept, which I'll get to in a minute, of a newsroom, of a different way of approaching creativity at the heart of what they do with Newcastle Brown Ale, a British beer in America where they have their positioning of no bollocks, of being anti-marketing, and their approach to Facebook, which has taken Facebook, actually done incredibly sophisticated approach to how they do it, while their storytelling and the way they tell the story is one of being the opposite of self-referential, actually taking the mickey out of what they're doing. So this is the story of Newcastle Brown Ale, and I think it's a really good example of how you don't have to take yourself seriously to take Facebook seriously.
Newcastle was told that a new Facebook strategy is serious business, that Newcastle would have to drive fan acquisition, generate authentic conversations, optimize our page's engagement funnel, and boost our PTAT. Really? That's all bollocks. Turns out, we just had to tell a couple of jokes, like this, and this, and this. 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 And this. Then we let people start calling bollocks on stuff themselves. So we created this. And they started doing this. 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 Oh, and this. Facebook seems to like it. The internet seems to like it. And so do the experts. It makes us wonder, are other beer brands funny on Facebook? Oh dear.
So the core message being lack of pretension, anti-marketing, but adopting that and telling the story so that that becomes the thing that people connect around. So there's a breadth of different stories that we can talk about what the right approach is for your brand. There's no Facebook strategy. One of the things I talk to clients all the time about in agencies is like, what should our Facebook idea be? What should our Facebook strategy be? The Facebook strategy should be core to who you are as a brand. And one of the biggest challenges some marketers have is they're just not used to this level, the level of authenticity and intimacy they need to actually express these conversations of what their brand is on such a regular basis. It's very different from running away and doing 3 print ads and 2 TV ads once a year and hoping that's enough. In this world, at this speed of culture, you need to have a far more defined and robust position, not just like as a PowerPoint slide, but in your heart for what your brand's purpose in the world is. And when you know that, and your agencies know that, and your marketing department knows that, it drives a conversation of value on Facebook and around the world. Not just on Facebook, but like across the whole ecosystem. But if you're faking it, if you're still trying to do spin, you're going to be found out because there's just too many different data points and too many different ways for people to shape your story. So it has to come from a position that you've really worked out who you are, what you're doing in the world, and why people should connect around you. So this idea of building a newsroom, I mentioned Droga 5, there's a lot of agencies around the world doing this now, this different approach to how we create content. It's not a question of quality, it's not a question of craft, of like good photography, good writing, good film, whatever it may be, good design. The difference is really cadence, and the way I sort of explain it, and I don't have good German examples, so I apologize, but I think of it as the difference between a stand-up comic. If you know how stand-up comics work for like 6 months refining an act down to 90 minutes, and they perfect, and they perfect, and they perfect, and they perfect. And then they launch that onto the world. Maybe they do a TV special, and everyone laughs, and it's amazing. That's an incredible craft. That's akin to the craft that we currently live in. But the world, and a huge part of the way in the world is engaging around brands, is doing a different complementary set that's more like a nightly comedy show. Like we have a show in the States, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, or Letterman. These shows have to show up every night, not because they're ready, as Lorne Michaels once said, but because it's 11 o'clock. And brands and their communication arts infrastructure, their agency infrastructure need to be structured around being able to show up. That doesn't just mean doing real-time ads because someone fell over, you should do an ad, but it means being ready and having the best people and the best writers and the best thinkers at the heart of what's happening here. And that is what I'm seeing increasingly happen around the world. I'll play you this one. This one won the top award. And I don't think we're ever at a case at our early stage of evolution of having perfect case studies. But what this case study did and what the jury overwhelmingly felt was the work that Draft FCB and 360i did on Oreo last year really proved this point out, that to really have the structural change we need and the attitudinal shift we need in the industry to create quality work at this kind of cadence takes more than just getting a junior intern in a corner cube, occasionally putting something on any of the social platforms that's basically meaningless. It takes it right into the heart of the process and saying, we're going to deliver quality and people will respond. So this is a story of what Oreo did with 100 days.
Oreo had a big birthday this year. The challenge? To keep this 100-year-old cookie young. The idea? To put an Oreo twist on pop culture every day. To do this, we launched a social program called The Daily Twist. 100 pieces of content created in 100 days in honor of the 100th birthday. Here's how it worked. The team worked in real time, scouring the internet every morning for headlines, features, iconic birthdays, dogs going into retirement, whatever was trending, and looked at them through the eyes of this playful cookie. Every day was a production day. Once concepts were developed, there was a full production team waiting in the wings. By 6 p.m., the day's twist would be pushed out to Oreo's 27 million Facebook fans, Twitter, and Pinterest, and to the Oreo Hub. Every fan seemed to have a different favorite.
Monday night, Oreo posted this on their Facebook page.
Oreos are gay.
What did we do for our 100th twist? We let our fans decide. From a fishbowl in Times Square, we crowdsourced topics and let the people vote on which twist should become the final one. And that's a whole lot of love.
So I want to wrap up. As I said in the introduction, I don't come from a technical background or a social media background or a Silicon Valley background. Bob Greenberg, who's my friend, who's the next speaker, has forgotten more this morning about a lot of these things than I'll probably ever learn. But from a storytelling standpoint, from a craft standpoint, the skills that are in this room, the skills that those of you, particularly those of you that have been in the industry a while, these are the core skills necessary to excel on Facebook. Humanity, storytelling, photography, language. These are the tools. It's not code. These are the primary tools to tell stories. What's different is the attitude we bring to the table. Photography, for example, is something you all know. I just walked through the gallery. Beautiful things. This is where they're going to connect with people at scale. Not just in a tiny corner of the world, but right at the heart of where culture meets these images. It's about doing beautiful things, but it's about doing them in a place where people can talk about them, share them, and engage with them. It used to be this, and TV is not going, I'm a huge fan of TV, I love TV, but that is not the place. The place where people are drawn, the Starsky and Hutch where people are running to, the thing that they're drawn to right now is mobile. The next big thing is 4 by 2 inches. We all know it. We've heard it for 7 years and we've ignored it. It's now actually happening. This is the primary creative canvas we need to be obsessed with making sure our work fits into. And it's an exciting place because people are going to engage with it and they're going to share it. And if you look, I have no idea what these creative examples said. These are the same people that told me David Hasselhoff was going to go down a treat. So hopefully this is well-respected work in the German market. If you look at the craft skills, they work beautifully well. The last thing I'll play for those of you in the room that are saying, man, I bet I can do better work than that. I can do better work than that Dallas work. I can do better work than that Oreo work. That Oreo work's just print metaphors. I can do better than print metaphors. Well, let me play you something from 1948.
America runs on Bolivar time.
In 1948, that was the first TV commercial ever made, and someone had to make it. And then someone made a better one. And I think we're a little further on than 1948 in the world of where social media and where creativity meet. but we're not that much further on. We're maybe 6 or 7 years further on. But this is the future, the way in which brands are going to connect and people are going to connect around them. And I think it's a super exciting time to really lean into this and explore the potential. And I look forward to coming back to Germany over the next few years, particularly while I'm in Europe, and seeing all the things you're doing. So thank you very much for having me here today. I really appreciate it.